Hello, hello, loves, and welcome to the next segment of the Women's Global Happiness Summit, where we are changing the world one woman at a time. I'm Karen Rackine, founder of Women's Global Happiness Day, Women's Happiness and Life Purpose educator and coach, and I'm so excited and so honored for our next speaker. She's a woman that I have admired from afar, and now I'm so excited that we get to have a conversation, a juicy conversation, and to have it with you as well. So let me introduce you to Professor Lee Waters. She has been a psychology researcher at the University of Melbourne for 23 years. She's published over 100 scientific journal articles and book chapters. She's the best-selling author of The Strength Switch, which is how the new science of strength-based parenting can help your child and your teen to flourish. And it also is helpful for adults, which we're going to get into. It's been published in Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, and it's being translated into 10 different languages, Korean, Japanese, many different languages. Lee is president of the International Positive Psychology Association, and she is the founding director of the Positive Psychology Center at the University of Melbourne. She contributes regularly to the media in Australia, the US, Canada, Asia, the UK, all over the world on topics of positive psychology, positive education, parenting. She was listed in the Financial Times and Westpac Bank 100 Women of Influence in 2015. I'm so excited to have this conversation about how we make the strength switch, both as parents, as women, as humans. So welcome to the summit, Lee.
Thank you. I don't know why I'm laughing. Sometimes I hear my introduction and maybe because this is on Zoom and like you're over in America and I'm here in Australia, it's like this sort of like hearing it from a distance. I think, oh my goodness, does that woman ever sleep? I don't think that woman ever sleeps. And then I realize that woman is, and I'm like, yeah, actually I do. I don't sleep as much as I should. Yeah, funny. Anyway,
well, and I didn't even get into that you're also, no, it's great. Because let's have a good time. I didn't even get into that you're also a mother and that it's like you have more in life than is even in your professional bio. So it's so, so true.
Yeah, the more important things in my life are not in my professional bio. And, funnily enough, that's one of the areas where positive psychology has helped me the most. And it was a genuine decision, like a very clear decision in my early 30s to say, okay, I need to have some kind of central point that actually connects together all of the areas of my life rather than sort of rushing to work and then rushing home and then rushing to a board meeting and feeling that they're all taking away from each other. And so that's where positive psychology became this very intentional central point of my life, because it spills over into my family, it spills over into work, it spills over into other responsibilities, and then apart from the fact that I don't sleep enough, I can use it to rejuvenate myself.
I love that so much, because so many women that I know feel fragmented, like you just described, and running around, right? Yes, they got like these balancing the 10 different plates in the air, trying to do it all perfectly, and that where's that common ground? And I love that you found that common ground in this science of human flourishing, in this science of well-being. It's incredible.
Yes, exactly. Because that's when I started to integrate into my professional life. I was just about to become a mum. I was doing a lot of it in my personal life, and as a trained psychologist. But it really was that thing of, I can't keep doing this. I'm being pulled apart in so many directions, and I'm constantly exhausted, and I'm constantly feeling like it's, if I give more to here, I have less to here, and ultimately I'm the one who's being drained because I'm trying to give everything to everyone. I'm not going to say it's a cure-all. Like, I'm 48 now. I made that decision when I was 31 that I needed some central integration point that fed into each of the areas of my life and then fed back into me. There are absolutely times where I still feel tired, absolutely exhausted. I don't feel as fragmented, which I'm very lucky. Well, I'm not lucky because I made a decision around that, but there are still times where I feel, especially when I travel. When I travel, that's hard because I'm traveling for the book, or I'm traveling to do consulting in schools, and it's a bit of an irony that I'm traveling to speak to other parents about how to be a good parent, but I have to leave my 2 children at home. So there's mother guilt around that, most definitely. But yeah, I think that
Yeah.
has helped me to, when I listen to my own, I think, how have I done all of that stuff? And I do think it's because I've had this central feature of the science of human flourishing that I've been able to apply to myself and in my role as a mum and in other roles. And it's like a restorative niche. I can kind of come back to, what do I know in those moments of exhaustion, in those moments of feeling overwhelmed, of mother guilt, like what do I know that can help me to feel safe again? And I feel very fortunate that I've had that knowledge that, you know, a lot of other women don't have, and that's a big part of the book. And obviously what you do too, Karen, is like
Right.
getting that knowledge out there to help women.
Well, and that's why we're doing the summit, is let's take all this knowledge of positive psychology, of what we know from the science and different aspects of well-being for women, and
Yeah.
give it to all of you out there. And I'm curious,
So
I want, it's so important. And what are, let's say, 3 aspects of positive psychology that you think really that help women and would help women kind of come to that central point and ground women?
wow, that's such a good question. Well, I'm definitely going to start with strengths, obviously, because that's the area that I've sort of specialized in, and it's the area that I do my research in, and I've wrote the book. And I think strengths are firstly, I want to say everyone has strengths, and there are different gender differences, not so much in the type of strengths we have, but in the belief that we have strengths. That's what I've noticed, is that society raises boys more in a way where they can own their strengths more peacefully, and they can use them more confidently. I think with the work I've done with women, and that was my own journey too, absolutely, was, you know, am I allowed to, well enough, am I allowed to own these? Big part of helping me own my strengths, and I think this helps women own their strengths, is that strengths aren't things that set you apart from other people. Your strengths aren't the things that make you better than other people, because everyone has strengths. So I'm not special, Karen, because you have your strengths and I have my strengths. And when I work with women, it's about helping them to own their strengths so that they can be at their best, absolutely, but also so that they can be at their best for others, using our strengths in service of others. I use my strengths to be a kind friend, and I use my strengths to restore myself, or to be a researcher who thinks things through clearly, so they're doing good research that impacts other people. So
Right.
first thing I want to say is strengths. Absolutely. Everyone has. I think women struggle to own our strengths, worry that it might set us apart from other women. But a lot of us have been conditioned to not necessarily think well of ourselves. But once you start to own the fact that you do have strengths, and everyone has their own unique strengths. You know, some people it's really clear thinking. Some people it's a great sense of kindness. You know, some women it's that sort of like wisdom that they have that's
like an inner
passed
wisdom
down from generation. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, some women, it's funny. I mean, I have some friends who are seriously like, you know, wet your pants funny. I love
Hilarious.
catching up with my girlfriends who are like,
Right.
just funny. So we all bring something to the table, and what the research on strengths shows us is that when we start to identify what are your unique constellation of strengths, what are the things that you find that you're naturally good at, what are the things that you get energy from, what are the things that you're self-motivated to do, what are your passions and interests. They're all indications of a strength that's sitting inside of you. If you perform well, if you learn something easily, if you're interested in it, if you're engaged in it, if you get energy, just getting energy from doing it is a sign that what's sitting underneath that is some kind of inherent strength. And what research shows is that the more that we play to our strengths, the more confidence we get, the more energy that we get, the better we are at being able to contribute to the lives of other people, can restore ourselves, leads to, you know, high levels of life satisfaction, you know, all of the kind of good things that we want for a flourishing life. A lot of this comes through doing it to say, I acknowledge that I have weaknesses. I acknowledge that I have vulnerabilities. I acknowledge that I have faults and flaws. I think women are very good at acknowledging those things. you know, I think women are very good at knowing what we're not good at. You know, we can sit down and
Right.
list off, these are my faults, these are my flaws, what I'm not good at, this is where I have a vulnerability. And yes, absolutely, a strength approach isn't about ignoring those things or turning a blind eye to them, but it's about putting them into perspective with the things that we're good at, the qualities that we have, the positive essence of who we are. Right beside every little fault, crack, you know, part of me that's not smoothed over, weakness, you know, right beside that is a strength. And if I start to like utilize, well, yes, I have this weakness, you know, for me, I have a tendency towards, well, I've had a history of mental illness, and so nowadays I still have a tendency to fall into anxiety quite quickly. That's a vulnerability of mine. It is a weakness, and I don't use that in a judgmental way anymore, but it's a genuine weakness. If I overload myself or certain triggers in my life, I can slip back into anxiety. I know that's a weakness.
Yeah.
But if I acknowledge that sitting right beside that is, you know, knowledge, humor, kindness, warmth, passion, ability to reach out to people to get help, then these are all strengths. These are assets that I can have that help me manage that weakness. It's not about ignoring weaknesses, but I think, so that'd be the first thing I'd say for women is really
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to say, I'm perfectly inhuman. I mean, perfectly imperfect, and that means I have weaknesses, absolutely. But sitting beside all of those weaknesses is just a universe of strength.
Right, or a whole host of strengths, and you nailed it. I mean, I just want to, like, you know, kind of frame the whole thing that we all have strengths, but we focus so much on our weaknesses or our flaws, right? And what's wrong with us. And when you talk about a strength switch, right? It's like the switch from where we focus. And I love how you're saying that, okay, like for me, I'm not the best at being detail oriented. That's like not my gig. But next
Mm.
to that, I'm a visionary
Yeah, big
and
picture.
I
Yeah.
big picture, and I make things, and I am an activator. Like I get things done and I can make things happen, and you know, and a
There's a
whole host
photo
of
of
other,
you.
yeah, thank you. And a
I've
whole
seen you.
host,
I know. I'm so excited.
oh my gosh, thank you. You know, so
I'm just acknowledging a strength in you, Karen.
and I receive. So thank you. I love it. I love it. And so,
Yeah.
you know, so where do we focus? And by focusing on even using our strengths to support the challenge, the weakness. I'm like you. I've actually suffered from an anxiety disorder since I was 3. That has just been part of, according to my mom, she said I was 3 when I started showing a lot of anxiety. And so using, what I'm hearing you say is using our strengths to work with our
Yes.
weaknesses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Help us to manage the areas of faults, flaws, weaknesses, whatever it happens to be, except that they're part of who we are. They're part of the human fabric. You know, often they're kind of they're the essence. They make us. Yeah. If I hadn't have had the journey that I've had, if you hadn't have had the journey that you've had, we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing right now. So, but we do. I mean, just generally speaking, human nature focuses on the negative, and I go into that in my book. You know, what are the brain biases that make us fall more to the negative than the positive? But then I think you add gender on top of that, and a female's experience, and we have a society. You know, and I'm watching that with my 12-year-old daughter now. Just how many implicit ways she's being told that she's not good enough, and the things that she's being told that she can't do, rather than being told what she can do. And it's very implicit, so it's hard to kind of make tangible. I try and make it tangible for her when I can. So yeah, I think you add women on top of that, and we have been socialized to focus on where we're not up to scratch. And it's so depleting, and it's not helpful for us. And like I said, it's not about ignoring those things. It would be helpful for me, the fact that I have a tendency to anxiety. It wouldn't be helpful for me if I ignored the fact that, you know, I'm messy and all of my faults and flaws. And, you know, if there's a TV on anywhere in the room, I just get mesmerized. You know, I'll be walking from the kitchen to the lounge room to get something done, and the TV's on, and I'm just like, you know, where that just TV just grabs my attention. So it's not about ignoring those things, acknowledging them, but just sitting them beside the things that we're good at. And, you know, from a mental health perspective, all of the research shows that that's a key part. And then I think, like I said, you add the layer of being where we're just socialized to focus on what we're not, who we're not, rather than who we are. And so I think strengths are particularly empowering.
So good, so good. And I want to get into, I'm going to come back to the other two aspects of positive psychology because we're so deep into strengths now, and that's why you call it the strength switch, right? The switch from
to switch our focus.
Our focus, and
just to counteract.
And so let's hone in, because you do work with, you know, a lot in parenting. This has been, you know, your research. Of course, the strength switch is helpful to all women, all people. But one of the things that you really focus on is this idea of a strengths-based parenting. And so can you share, how can women listening to this use this approach to actually enjoy mothering more?
Yeah, I love that question. Because, you know, I mean, I love being a mum. I have a 16-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, and I love it. I cannot imagine my life without my kids, but it's not always an enjoyable role. It's not always an easy role. You know, it's a really tough role being a mum. And if we can find ways to make it easier, to make it more enjoyable, but also, I think, importantly, to make it more effective, to make us more effective mothers, make us better mothers. And so that's been a big part of, when I started doing the research on strength-based parenting, the research question was more about, what does this do to the kids? What does it do to the mental health, the academic grade, the talent of children who have been raised by parents and help them to see and utilize their strengths? And, you know, the research program shows that it buffers, it reduces anxiety, it reduces depression, stress, negative emotions, enhances positive emotions, self-confidence, life satisfaction, etc. So it's good for the kids. But then next kind of question along that research program was, okay, well, what about for parents? Because I've read so many parenting books, and I do talk a little bit about my backstory in the Strength Switch, but I, you know, unfortunately didn't have. Well, I mean, the bottom line is I was raised in a very abusive home, lots of domestic violence, psychological violence. The domestic violence came from my mother, who very sadly has a mental illness, and so that meant she wasn't able to regulate herself as well as she could. Psychological violence from both of my parents, not just in my childhood, but all the way through my adulthood. I had to make it was the right decision, but it's still a painful decision. I had to make the decision to step away from my family of origin. And so it sounds like a little bit of an irony that I focus on parenting, but it's exactly why I do focus on parenting.
Yeah, it's not.
The reason why.
It doesn't sound like an irony to me. It makes sense. I mean, you grew up. Yeah.
I suppose there's anyway, it's driven what I do. And you know, for me, a big sadness in my life was losing my sister to suicide a couple of years ago. And that's just a really, I'm going to get upset. It's just a very profound pain to have lost her in the way that I lost her. Mm-hmm. But it was also the final decision-making to step away from my toxic relationship. So when I first became pregnant, I read every single parenting book you could possibly imagine, because I didn't have a script. And I was like, I know I don't want to do this the way I want to give my children a different life to the childhood that I had, and I want to be a different parent. I have a lot of compassion for my parents. They're all this kind of intergenerational stuff that's coming through. You know, unfortunately, they weren't able to really address their pain, and so pass it on to their children. I was very determined not to do that. I knew I wouldn't pass my pain on to my children because I'd had years already. I'd had sort of 15 years of very, very intense psychotherapy. And when I first started my psychotherapy, I was studying psychology for a PhD. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of my childhood. Wow. And I'd overcome that, and I'd overcome an eating disorder, and I'd overcome depression and anxiety. As I said, I still have a tendency to flip into anxiety. But so I knew I wasn't going to pass my game to my kids, but I wanted to do, I wanted to say, I actually want to elevate my children. And I don't know how to do that. Even though I'm a qualified psychologist, I haven't been taught how to do that. I've been taught how to, as a qualified psychologist, I knew I was having a son, if he came to me and he was struggling, friendship issues, I'm all over it. Qualified psychologist, I know how to do that stuff. But I thought, I don't know how to make their life better. My training hasn't taught me how to make their life better. And I read a single parenting book you can imagine. One of my strengths is curiosity, and that's why I'm a university researcher, because I love asking questions and answering questions. And what I found at the end of reading 9 months worth of parenting books is I just felt very confused. I felt overwhelmed. Like, this book was saying these 6 steps, and this book was saying do these 3 steps, and some of the steps didn't match. And I was really like, I don't know what to do here. And so what I love about the strength-based parenting approach, and what our research with parents has shown us, is that with the strength-based parenting approach, what you're doing is you're working with something that is already in your child. So you're looking at your child for who they really are, not what society says they should be, not your own expectations, who your child really is, knowing that every child has weaknesses and faults and flaws, but every child also has strengths. So the beauty of the strength-based approach is you don't have to import something into your child, and you don't have to follow these 7 steps of perfect motherhood. What you do is you start with what's there. My son is funny. He's really, he's got an amazing sense of humor, and he's a good athlete. So, we're really kind of working on that for him. And times where things aren't going so well in his life, he can draw on his humor, and that gives him perspective. My daughter is very kind. She's a very kind-hearted little girl, and she's very creative. She's always drawing. She put the TV on and she'll be doodling, and she makes people's birthday cards, and that's the thing about strengths is strengths are about 50% nature, 50% nurture. So you are born with a potential towards the strength. My son was born with his potential for sporting ability and his humor, and my daughter was born with that potential towards kindness and artistic creativity. So the beauty of strength-based parenting is it's like panning for a goal that is already there. Your job as a parent is just to tune into it and elevate it, kind of bring it out of your child. So it's a very joyful way to parent. Research shows that parents who take this approach have high levels of confidence. And I know, that's what our research program shows, but I know the work that I do in the courses that I run with parents, that's absolutely what parents say, is that because I've shifted my focus, it's not that I'm ignoring my child's problems or weaknesses or rude behavior or the fact that they're on PS4 for too long and they're not studying as many hours. I'm not ignoring that, but I'm sitting that beside their good qualities and their strengths. As a parent, you start to see I am making a difference. I can see positive progress. When we're always focused on what our child is not doing, as a parent, you do feel like, I'm not good enough. I'm not doing a good enough job here. My son is not learning to issue the way, or I can never get my kids to school on time, or whatever it happens to be. So it's a really nice way to parent. It gives you confidence because you see the positive progress you're making with your kids. You get to use your own strengths. So when we use our strengths, they're the things that we feel good about ourselves. They're the things that motivate us. They're the things that give us energy. You get to use your strengths in those tiny moments of challenge that we all with our children. I'll give you an example from my home at the moment. It's only a little example, but Emily's going through this habit of forgetting to shut the refrigerator door. And so she goes into the fridge, she grabs out a snack, she kind of half shuts it, but she doesn't seal it. And so, of course, I'm worried that food's going to go bad. And it's being this little Emily, come on, shut the door, shut the door, shut the door, shut the door. And I've been nagging her. It doesn't work. I personally should know better because qualified psychologist.
And this is your area of expertise. But you're also
parenting. But I'm just a mum, and our habit goes towards problem and what's the most expedient way to fix this problem. And we think nagging is that expedient way. And I don't know why I keep doing it, because all of the research shows nagging doesn't work. And actually, anyone out there, whether you're nagging a child, whether you're nagging yourself, whether you're nagging a partner or a friend, nagging doesn't work. That's, by definition, because we have to keep nagging. So like it hasn't worked. The message has not landed. So I was doing the nag thing. Yeah, like we don't stop and go, well, this isn't working. We just keep nagging more, get
I've been saying
louder.
this for 3 years, and yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's such a good
So
point.
I walked into the kitchen, the refrigerator doors open, I get exasperated. Emily walks in, and I'm about to sort of, you know, like, come on, this is not, you're 12-year-olds, we should be able to learn stuff. But in that moment, I had this little moment of clarity, and which was like, okay, can I take a strength-based approach to this? And what I use is humor. So I just had this moment where, I don't know why, but it came into my head, and I pretended to be the cheese. So I put on this voice and I said to Emily, Emily, I'm the cheese and I'm melting. Please shut the door. And she laughed, you know, and she said, oh, Mom, I'm sorry, I'm trying to learn. And so it just was this moment where the message was delivered, same message, but it was delivered through a strength. And so it didn't create tension between us. She still understood. She went and shut the door. We could have a laugh. And then I said to her, you know, next time you're about to shut the door, think of the cheese. You know, okay, I will. Think of the cheese. I don't want the cheese. And I'm not saying it was the perfect cure, but she's shutting the door a little bit more these last few days. So, yeah, it comes into these really little moments in parenting. But the bigger picture is that as parents, when we take that strength-based approach, boosts our confidence, boosts our sense of positive emotions, boosts our sense of joy. But I also actually think it boosts our effectiveness. It makes it better. It makes us better parents because we're playing to the things that we're good at, play to the things that we're good.
I love that so much. And your example is so perfect because it's simple, right? It's in the moment.
Yes.
It's a lot of intention, right? And this is why you and I, before we started taping, said really this approach isn't just for parenting, and this with your partner, with your colleagues, and like you said, with yourself. And one of the things that
Absolutely.
you were mentioning, you know, how women, we focus so much on what's wrong with us. And what a shift it would be to start focusing on what's right with us. And how, you know, when I work with women and I'll ask, what are you proud of? You know, they'll always, often will tell me that they're proud of their child and what their child did, right? Which is great. Okay, perfect. And what about yourself? And then it's harder, right, for women to speak of their strengths. And often I find women aren't even aware that their strengths are strengths because they come so naturally.
Yes. That's a good point. And I do talk about that in my book, this notion of strength blindness. That's what the term that psychologists like. Strength blindness, that because our strengths come so naturally to us, we don't see them as strengths. We don't see them as like a special feature that other people don't have. We just assume, oh, well, everyone has this because it's always been with me and it comes naturally to me. And so we become blind to it. And when we become blind to it, then we can't utilize it as, and I think, I've got a girlfriend, for example, I'll give you a concrete example of strength blindness. So this is a girlfriend I've known since my university days, you know, known each other for almost 3 decades. Lovely, just, you know, beautiful long-term friendship. And she's a very good cook. And I'm not. That's actually one of my weaknesses. I'm not that way inclined at all. And it's not a weakness that I feel I need to fix. I'm not investing energy in it because, you know, I can buy great meals and, you know, I'm rudimentary. I can cook a good enough spaghetti bolognese that my kids are happy. But
your kids are not starving.
I'm not going to invest my time in it.
Yeah, as long as your kids have food, you know, they're eating, it's fine.
They'd like to go to their grandma's place for dinner because she is a good cook, but they're not starving. And so my girlfriend comes over about once every 6 months. We catch up. She came over to my place recently. She cooks because she's better, and it's all unspoken. She opens up the refrigerator door, she puts out ingredients that I would never in 1,000 years think to combine. All the while she's chatting away to me, she's frying things up, she's getting things, she's, you know, putting things in, and she puts together this amazing meal. goes out into my backyard. She gets these gorgeous little flowers to garnish the dish. We've just come out of, I know you guys in the US, you're just going into summer. We've just come out of summer. So we're in the fall right now. We're heading into fall. So this was in summertime. Get out onto the back deck. She's like, oh, you know, have you got a nice tablecloth? I'm like, well, I think we got one for our wedding somewhere. Like, it's the back of the pantry. It's not my thing, you know. So we sit down to this amazing meal, and all the while she hasn't even thought about it. She's been filling me in on her life, her job, her kids, etc. It's like she hasn't even paid attention, and she's crafted this amazing meal. And we're sitting down, and we're about to, you know, how do you? I don't understand how you do it. She said, well, you know, it's pretty easy. You could do it. And honestly, I cracked up laughing because I was like, you have known me for nearly 30 years. Have you ever, ever seen me be able to cook at this level without concentrating? I can't even cook at that level, even when I concentrate. So it was this classic moment where, because it was so easy to her, it's a strength in her.
Right.
She didn't see it, was blind to it. She was, anyone could whip this meal together. You could whip this meal together. And I think that we do have strength blindness, and I don't, you know, I wouldn't want to say there's any research on this, although there may be, but my sense is that we are more blind to our strengths potentially. And that's because I think because of the social overlay of focus on what we're not, focus on what we don't have, focus on the areas we need to fix, on the areas that we do have, stand strong in the areas that we do have. And when I was pregnant with my son, so he's 16 now, so it's 17 years ago, and the field of positive psychology I was reading about this new field that was about science of human flourishing, boosting up our positive states, our positive relationships, not just fixing what was wrong with us. That was a real light bulb moment for me, both as a professional psychologist, but also in my personal journey. And I took myself off to sea. I found a strength-based psychologist. There weren't many at that time. And so I went in, I had the first two sessions with the psychologist. And so I don't know about your listeners, if no one's had therapy before, you know, typically the first three therapeutic sessions are really about patient history. And so we went through, I'd seen many other therapists before that. And we went through the patient history, and I never forget this, because at the end of either the second or the third session, I've been making a lot of notes, and this pen down, looked at me, and I remember my heart dropping. I remember my physiology just dropping, because I thought, because we're going to go through, you know, child abuse. Earlier in the interview, I was raped at the age of 11 by someone that my father brought home to live with us for a certain time. Domestic violence from my mother. My mother spent time in and out of psychiatric institutions, multiple suicide attempts. It was a really dark childhood. And I felt like I'd done a lot by the time I got into my early 30s to overcome that. And I felt like he was going to say, all right, these are all the things that I've been through. These are all the things that are wrong with you.
And here's the issue.
As a result. Yeah. And so I had this moment of panic. He just looked at me and he said, have you got any idea how strong you are to have survived what you have survived, to have stayed open-hearted, to have not become a bitter person, to have completed a PhD, to be in a long-term relationship with with your husband, to have good friends, you know, that you've had since you were 15. There's such strength in you to have overcome what you have overcome, to have sustained relationships and be clear about your purpose. I'm a psychologist who have helped other people. And of course, I started bawling my eyes out, because by that stage in my life, I had a lot of love. I did. I had a lot of love. I had loving husband, loving family-in-law, beautiful friendships. So I wasn't lacking in love. And I'd done a lot of therapy to overcome the depression, the eating disorder, the PTSD. But I still felt that I was quite weak, and no one in my life had told me that I was strong. And I think that's because I was telling all of my friends and my husband and everyone, well, I'm still weak, I'm still weak, I'm still weak. So this person strong. I went home to my husband, I remember, because he said, how was it? And I said, oh my goodness, like this guy, he told me that I was strong. And I remember my husband saying, well, pay to see a strength-based psychologist. So probably not that much of a surprise that he told you that you were strong.
Right, not a big stretch.
Yeah, okay. Good point, good point, good point. I was seeking that out. I didn't realize I was seeking it out until I started reading positive psychology. And then, but I think what's important about my relationship with that therapist was not so much that, well, certainly that he told me that I was strong. But even when he told me that I was strong, even though I had the watershed and the tears, I still didn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. And it took like a couple of years of him really working with me, not just this generic like statement of you are strong, but really specifically like these are your strengths.
Yes.
Me, he pointed out that my intellect, he was like, that was a real savior for you. And it was. I mean, I loved school. School was my safe place. It was predictable. It was safe. There were routines. I was praised.
Right.
And I was very lucky that I had a strength that suited school because I was curious. I loved learning. I had intellect. And so that was a strength that, when you're not at home, most of the time as a child, you're at school. So I had this second area of my life where I felt good and I was safe and I was praised. And that really helped me a lot because I was using my strengths. He pointed out that I think, maybe I was born this way, but it was certainly heightened in my childhood. It was, just the gift of compassion, empathy, intuition, and kindness. And, just understanding from a really young age that a lot of people struggle, a lot of people are suffering, and that suffering impacts their behavior. And so my response has always been not to judge and to sort of come from compassion and understand why that person is behaving, even if that person's being very hurtful to me, trying to have compassion for them. And he helped me to see that that was a great strength, and that's what helped me to make lovely friendships. So I didn't have a happy childhood or time at home, but I was always at my friend's place, and I was always having sleepover at my friend's place. And so that was he really helped me to see, like, this is a strength, and this is how you are utilizing it to help yourself. And I didn't realize, of course, I had strength blindness. I didn't realize at the time as a teenager that I was utilizing these strengths to help me cope with the situation. But then once I got into my 30s and he helped me to see that, he was like, well, like I said, it took me a couple of years to own those, but he's like, now you do. How are you going to use these more intentionally? You're about to be a mother. What type of mother do you want to be? How can you use these in your role as a psychologist? And it changed everything. It changed my research question at the university. Now, now I do what I do, and I work with parents, and the book is all over the world. It's been translated into 10 different languages. The parenting course that I was running in Australia has now been turned into an online course, so it's all across the world. I've got facilitators across the world running it, and I genuinely think that's because I had a couple of years of seeing my strengths, not being blind to them, and just asking myself the question, how can I use these strengths to be in service of others? How I can't change my past, but I can change other people's future, and that's what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh, Lee. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being so vulnerable and so honest. I know that I personally am touched, and I know a lot of women watching this can relate with all you've been through.
Yeah.
And
it's sad that so many of us can relate. And I have started to share my story since I lost my sister, because I think a big reason why she's not here is that she kept it silent, and she suffered in silence.
yes.
And so, I'm it's almost like I'm telling her story, to be honest. That's what's motivated me. But in the last 2 years, as I have started to talk about my story, and it's hard. I mean, you can see I get upset.
Of course.
People I don't know across the world who are watching me get upset right now. But I just think we have to do it, especially as women, Karen. We have to be prepared to not put on this veneer and say that everything's perfect. And this is where, again, I hate to harp back onto strengths, but I think there's one thing to be vulnerable and share your suffering and your story with other people. But if you're just left in this state of vulnerability, that's actually not helpful. That's not healthy.
Right.
But if you've got this safety net of strengths and good relationships, then you can be vulnerable because you've got something that can lift you back up. But what I found in the last few years, just talking about my story, she's so, it's both heartwarming and sad. It's the number of people, not just women, to be honest, who come up to me after I gave a big talk last week in my hometown of Melbourne for this social justice conference, and it's all these little community action groups and just all doing amazing work. My sister was a social worker, and her role before she left, I'll say left, she was working with female prisoners in an early release program, and she was helping the female prisoners leave prison early and get readjusted back into society and with family and with their families. And so I love these kind of groups, these social justice groups. But so many of them have come up to me after I shared my story on stage. Say I had a very similar childhood, or my wife had a very similar childhood, or my husband's had a very similar childhood. So I think it's important that we talk about these things because everyone has a question. But we need to talk about them and then provide some kind of way out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you shared so much. I agree that it's absolutely critical that we first own our stories, that this is what gave us so many of our strengths. So many of our strengths, I call it pain to purpose. So many of our strengths, so much of our purpose comes from the pain. And it's not that we are strong or that you're strong despite your childhood. You're strong because of your childhood.
Strong.
Right. And because
of the therapeutic work.
Right. But he recognized that in you before that. And then what you're saying, I love this, is, and it is, we can get together and just kind of complain about what's wrong, but instead it's like to be able to talk about here are my challenges and here's how it has made me better, more courageous, or here's strength, or kinder, or more greater wisdom, or whatever might come. And that is the opportunity. And I think as women, if we can when we can support one another in mirroring those strengths, and when we hear a challenge story, we hear a story of woe, we can mirror in the other woman, you talk about this, and here's the strengths I see in you, right? And so, this is so important, what that therapist did for you and what you are now doing for parents, for women, for schools, for humanity. I'm just so grateful. I'm truly, truly, truly honored. And so
thank you, Karen. Yeah, and it's easy about, I love your expression. What did you say? Turning pain into purpose?
Pain to purpose. Mm-hmm.
Pain to purpose, yeah. I think that's really empowering for us to say, what can we gain from this? How can we grow from this? What can we learn from this? Psychologists call that adversarial growth or post-traumatic growth. And I think that's really important, actually, to let people know when they're in their darkest times that it won't fracture them or break them forever. They're not always broken. They can actually become better, stronger, wiser, kinder as a result of this experience. There's a silver lining on that dark cloud.
Yes.
And you look at all the major religions and they do preach that too. It's not just a sort of, I think about it as a psychologist, but the lotus flower, the most beautiful, gorgeous, dainty flower, grows in mud. It grows in the darkest, deepest mud, and it turns out to be this thing of beauty. So I do find that's a really important message when I'm working with women, particularly women who are struggling, is to say that I know you don't feel this way now, but some real beauty is going to come out of this, and you'll be stronger as a result of it. And I mean, strong doesn't mean you're always strong. Like I wouldn't say that I'm like beautifully strong with everything. I'm not this like, and I'm not this like super muscly. There are parts of me that are strong, and there are parts of me that are vulnerable. And the counterintuitive, the more you own your vulnerability, the stronger you become.
Exactly. And strong here doesn't mean like this strong.
No.
It's waking up the next day to put food on the table. I I mean, when we talk about
Yeah,
strength, or waking up the next day to go back to school, that's
that's right.
so,
Yeah, and making a decision to be open-hearted and stay loving
yeah.
despite what's happening. And I remember reading somewhere about, you've got the big acorn tree, big, thick branch, and then you've got your little kind of willow. And which one is stronger? Well, the acorn tree looks stronger, but if a really, really harsh wind comes, the acorn tree has no bend, whereas the little
Mm,
willow tree will kind of bend in the wind. So it seems weaker, but it actually has the capacity to adapt to the circumstances. So yeah,
wow.
it's sort of a counterintuitive that to be strong, you also have to own your vulnerability and allow yourself to be weak. And
Right.
people don't understand that. They think, oh, I've got weaknesses, I've got faults, I've got flaws, I've got vulnerability. That means I'm not strong. I can see the morning light is coming through on my screen, and I can see, see, look, can you see that? See how I look like I've got sunglasses on? Or is that just me?
No, I can see it. Now I can see it. Yeah. Oh
Because
my gosh. I love it.
we've got the beautiful full
Morning. It's so great because,
morning over here.
right, it's night for me and morning for you. And Lee,
Yeah.
you've shared so much with us. I mean, I have learned so much just in our short conversation here. And thank you for sharing your personal story and sharing how to turn it into a strength story. And that any of us can do that. You should be so proud of it. And thank you for this book. Any of you, even if you're not parents, it says strength-based parenting, but I'm telling you, because I'm not a parent yet, and it's really about making the switch, the strength switch from anywhere in your life where you're focusing on weakness. As Lee says, it's going to be there,
Yeah.
but so are the strengths, and focus here. So Lee, I have one
Just flick the
last
switch,
question.
flick the switch.
Make the switch. Okay,
Go.
so you might answer. Okay, here's the last question.
First on switch. Okay, yeah.
What is one thing, and you've covered a lot, but what is one thing you think every woman should know?
How to set boundaries.
Ooh.
I know that's like a whole new conversation.
I know. So
Okay.
listen, that's going to be next year, the boundary conversation.
All right.
Women's Global Happiness
Sure.
Summit. But for now, set the boundaries. So thank you again for being part of the Women's Global Happiness Summit.
How to set boundaries. And of course, play to your strengths. Play to your strengths.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
All of you out there, thank you so much for watching this segment of the Women's Global Happiness Summit. As Lee says, this is our opportunity, all of us, to make the strengths switch, because when we focus on our strengths, we are going to be able to help others do the same. So thank you for watching the Women's Global Happiness Summit, where we are changing the world one woman at a time, starting with Lee, starting with me, starting with you. We are in this together. Bye for now.